Hey guys, just wanted to make a quick video. Somebody asked me about the scattered information throughout my videos, and they said, okay, so basically what is it all about? And my previous basically videos are more so a timeline, sequence of events, and a general breakdown, but less so a quick summary. So if I was going to explain this as fast as I could and try not to miss any too huge of pertinent details, this is how it would go. So I joined the Air Force in 2019. My life was being sabotaged up until then by somebody named by the name of Saif ul Haq and a woman by the name of Rebecca Bauer. Rebecca Bauer works for General Tersini. That information is pertinent later on. I was forced to live with Rebecca Bauer after my home was flooded. I basically just had kept getting my home damaged, seemingly intentionally. The flood irrigation would never flood my home until that one day somebody had opened up the floodgate and it flooded my home. There was like 6 inches of water. It was canal water because that's what flood irrigation is in that part of Arizona. And basically everything in my home had smelled like fish and algae at that point. And so everything I had was ruined, and that was done intentionally. The person who I rented the home from, he is a bad landlord, and he has like a 1-star review, and he's known for robbing ASU students of their security clearance compensation and taking part in that process. So anyways, I was forced to move in with Rebecca Bauer. I didn't have any other options, and they knew as much, and they basically had that charade ready to go. Right across the street from her lived somebody named Linda Puhek. Even the jobs that I was working at were being sabotaged, and I was getting fired under false pretenses. I was being harassed at machine shops and aerospace companies, and the person in charge of running those and the person that works closely with those folks, his name is Mike Hughes, and he also works with the CIA. And that's pertinent because when I finally joined the Air Force in 2019, after all of those events and after I talked to the neighbor across the street, and after I was told over at ClearLink that I wouldn't have a better future unless I finally joined up, and they said, we'll send you to Germany, we'll give you a good life, blah, blah, blah. I basically had no options, and it's something that I needed to do. I made it into a competitive program because of my scores and who I was as a person. I got into a Yankee white security clearance process program, and part of that also had to do with some of the people that I knew and them having faith in me being able to pursue that security clearance process. But at the end of the day, really what they wanted is to rob me of the compensation that comes to you from all the damages that you experience in the security clearance process. And those damages can be especially high if they force you to experience that process over in the civilian world. So, at some point in my time in the Air Force, there was a rape over at a black site, and that was during SEER training. A lot of the medical professionals would just like stick needles in you and, act crazy around you and all that kind of stuff, and just to test your resilience is the idea. But a rape occurred, and I made sure to report it on base as soon as I got back, and I was punished for that. They did not like that I reported it. They did not like that their scam was just got a wrench thrown into the gears. They did not enjoy that because they would no longer be able to rob me of my security clearance compensation if I immediately pursued compensation for the sexual assault, which I did. I filed a form for the damages that I experienced on base, and they have those forms over at the law office that you pick up. You fill it out, and you say, I experienced these damages, I'm expecting compensation, this is unacceptable. I also went to the SAPR office, Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. I reported it to them. They basically shut down the conversation. They did not pursue the conversation the way I was trained in basic training that they would pursue a conversation like that. They immediately jumped to the conclusion of, they immediately jumped to the act of pushing me away and saying, there's nothing we can do, why are you even here, and basically corralling me out of the office. They didn't sit me down in an office and talk to me about details, none of that. And so, the next day I go to pick up my lunch from the commissary, just grab some simple grocery items and throw together a lunch. and a man outside starts trouble, and he lies to the police and says that I assaulted him. It's a military base. There's tons of cameras. There's tons of information there. Everybody knew that I did not assault him, but they ran away with that piece of information, and the next day police showed up to my workplace and they arrested me. They made a whole show of it. They made me undress, walk to them backwards, all that business. They put me in solitary confinement immediately afterwards. They held me there. They yelled at me in that room. They were just like being awful, shitty human beings, basically. So I stayed in solitary confinement for quite a while after that. And right after that experience, they sent me right back to the same black site where the rape occurred to torture me further. Then they went ahead and imprisoned me all over again, but in my dorm room this time. And oftentimes they would not bring me food when I needed food. They would go ahead and make a phone call. I would call them and be like, hey, I'm out of food, I need food. And they'd say, well, too bad, you don't get food. Nobody's around, nobody's in the area, there's nothing we can do. And so basically they said, if you leave your dorm room, we're going to arrest you. But they also didn't provide me food. And so I was kind of like caught in that kind of a place where I just had to starve myself so that I wouldn't experience another rape, another solitary confinement, another torture. And all of that occurred, and just 2 weeks later, after being, a few weeks of being locked in my room, General Tersini, who runs the base, and Ethan Tersini, who works with her, they went ahead and kicked me out. They took all my things, they shoved them in boxes and bags, set them on the curb outside of the base, and then they pushed me outside of the base. And basically I had another year of enlistment at that point, but they wanted to go ahead and pretend that I had a short enlistment because they were really frustrated that I reported the rapist that was working at the black site. Now, it turns out the reason that black site is a black site is they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing, right? They're not supposed to be using a torture facility to build evidence to later reference and say, oh, look, this person is unstable and unable to care for himself. Usually what they're supposed to do is compartment that information to the military alone and say, oh, well, this is a training exercise. Obviously, he wasn't actually at a hospital. Obviously, he doesn't actually have anything wrong with him. But instead of doing all that and keeping the information secure, what they do is they videotape you while you're inside that facility, and they mess with you. While the movie's on the TV, they'll turn it off and they'll turn it back on, and they try to provoke as many confrontations as they can, and they try to provoke them and keep the footage on camera. And that's their entire job, and that's basically what they do. And so when I reported the rape, basically, they were no longer able to weaponize their black site facility and say, oh, look, this individual doesn't know how to care for himself. This is why we had to send him here. He's mentally unstable. He has special needs. They were no longer able to do that. I took away their ammunition, their legal ammunition that they were going to try to use to put me under a conservatorship. Now, why all this business? I mean, why are they trying to be your guardians? Why are they trying to put you under a conservatorship? What is this money you're talking about? Well, the money, first and foremost, would be the security clearance compensation. Now, a Yankee white security clearance involves damaging the individual a lot. They really want to test you. They really want to push you to your limits. They really want to try you really hard. And that also encompasses being paid for the damages that you've experienced. Now, the people that run this process are folks like Saif-ul-Haq and Saif Abdullah and General Tersini and General Charles Brown, folks that are generals and work in a high level of government. And they're really awful people considering what they're up to. You know, they're literally raping people, trying to raise how much compensation they could harvest. And so they're pretty awful for that. And so after they packed my things and set them on the curb, and basically they tried to make me sign documents and stuff, but I wouldn't. They basically pushed me off base, and they were being really shitty to me. And so that was my transition out of the military. There was no time for me to try to find work. There was no effort on their part to help me have a smooth transition. What they did is they just pushed me through some courses, some programs, They made me write a fake little budget, even though I wasn't even able to shop apartments and know prices and stuff. They were just like making me pencil whip forms, and then they kicked me off base. So they were trying to cover their asses, but at the end of the day, what they were doing is just throwing together some legal cover-up to their sexual assault cover-up. And that's what happened. And then, yeah, so I went back to Arizona. I got my own place. I moved in to a motel for a couple weeks, and then I was able to get my own place. And then I was able to get in touch with the family of a special needs person. His name is Saif Ulhaq. He suffers from microcephaly as a result of his mother's alcoholism, which means that he has fetal alcohol syndrome, which means that his brain is undeveloped and he's special needs. That person, I mentioned him earlier, is actually a general with the Navy, so his parents were able to bribe his way into the military. What they did is they went ahead and said, okay, yeah, you can live with our son, blah, blah, blah. They basically had me taking care of him for years before that while I was in the while I was attending university. They had me hanging out with him and taking care of him. You know, he didn't have friends. He needed somebody to talk to about his special needs. He needed somebody to pretend that they also had special needs so they could more easily have him open up to their friend, and that's what his parents directed me to do. They even directed me to go to an office at the university, a medical office, and say, blah, 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 I have special needs, give me documentation for it because I need it elsewhere, and basically to show Saif Ulhaq, look, I'm just like you, right? And what they did is what I ended up finding out much later, after living with Saif Ulhaq and after taking care of him and after cleaning up after him and doing his dishes and cooking for him, and he even wanted me to clean his toilets at one point, but I kind of drew the line because he would literally poop on his toilet seat. I mean, the guy is special, kind of special. And so, you know, I drew the line there after a while of having trouble with him. I mean, I have cleaned bathrooms before. And this was his own bathroom, right? I had the guest bathroom, where that one that everybody would use, and I would keep that one sparkling clean because that's just how I live. But anyways, you know, after some time of living with Saif Ulhaq, there was a little sexual assault trial that they held online. It was a digital format one, and it was held by Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. They held it over Zoom, and they held it over YouTube. So that was that. And then they said basically, okay, you're entitled to some hundreds of millions of dollars because of what happened. That really wasn't cool. During the trial process, they had the guy that sexually assaulted me and the guy that raped me. He went ahead and grabbed his firearm, and he went to the restaurant that I was going to for my break session from the trial. And so yeah, it was very dirty process. They were still trying to kill me just to cover it up. I mean, they went to those kinds of lengths. Yeah, and so that's the kind of stuff that was happening. And then living with Saif Ulhaq was a bit of a nightmare because he was basically causing me as much trouble as he could, so that he could build evidence to say that he's a good friend of mine and I'm having mental health issues, just furthering their group criminal effort to attempt to put me under a conservatorship and attempt to rob me of my security clearance compensation. And so when that became very clear to me, I once again filed forms. I not only filed forms with the Air Force to pay me for my security clearance compensation. I not only filed those official forms, but I also filed forms to go ahead and get paid for my sexual assault compensation, and they refused to do both. And so after that, during that entire process, I've been being harassed by people, people at the aerospace companies that I once again worked at. Were staffed with former military folk that works in the intelligence community, and they were conspiring to attempt to rob me and do anything they could to rob me. People that I worked for in the Air Force before were cropping up in my life and stalking me, showing up to my workplace, paying the employer to pretend they worked there for some time, and attempting to gaslight me, basically. All sorts of things like that. And there was also abuse with my housing. I was constantly refused normal housing. I was always forced to live with somebody that I genuinely didn't like, and that includes Saif ul Haq, that includes somebody like Mustafa Saleh, that includes who I was cool with at the time, but it turns out he was into Saif ul Haq's scheme, and he was part of attempting to falsely evict me and try to squat in the place. And so that includes Saif ul Haq, that includes Mustafa Saleh, and several others, folks like Rebecca Bauer. So I was, once again, even after my time in the Air Force, I was forced to live with individuals that worked with the intelligence community and had relations with the military, and were part of the criminal effort to conspire to extend my security clearance investigation as long as possible so that they can reap the rewards of it, and also cause me as many damages as possible so that when their plan of putting me under a conservatorship succeeded, they would have a bigger bonus, basically, to take home, simply by lying. And so I started, protecting myself. Saif ul Haq was pointing firearms at me at that point in the home. After he told me all this stuff, after he told me, hey, this is what we're going to do to you, this is how we're going to rob you, you're in my house, you don't have anything, I have guns, I have friends with guns, and he started pointing guns at me, bringing his friends over to point guns at me. I decided that since calling the police on him wasn't working, I'd called the police 3 times maybe within the span of 2 days. Since that wasn't working, I needed to get a restraining order. So I went to the court, I got a restraining order. It was very easy considering all the evidence I had documented and built up against him. And that was that, and I had exclusive living rights to the home. Mustafa Saleh attempted to force himself into the home. He said, oh, I'm a renter here. I was like, sorry, I have exclusive living rights to the home. You don't get to just pretend you rent a room here. That's not how this works. And so he moved his things out of the place, and we parted ways. I had to change the locks. I had to unplug the garage so they wouldn't break in, because they repeatedly broke in, and they repeatedly put recording devices all over the home. I mean, the PlayStation had a hole drilled in it, and there was an obvious camera put in there. I had to unplug the devices in Saif ul Haq's room so that nothing would catch fire, and so he wouldn't run up the electricity bill, which I had taken on. And so I had to do all sorts of things like that. And when I was taking care of making sure that no electrical devices were going, he had just the same way the PlayStation had a hole drilled in it and an obvious camera plugged in, so did the clothing iron in his room, etc., etc. And so this guy was a nut job. He was trying to play this little spy game, and I just wasn't playing along with the way he wanted me to. He wanted basically to set up a boxing match to guarantee that he won, and I was effectively guaranteeing that he wouldn't win, because he basically told me everything that he was going to do to me, like some sort of shitty, stupid supervillain, and he is in fact clinically retarded, and so it's not like anybody's expectations were that high. And so, yeah, the housing abuse continued, the financial abuse at my workplaces continued, and the theft continued. I even started, after that, I moved out, got other jobs, I traveled the country, just working simple jobs. He would follow me around, so would folks from my former Air Force unit. That includes a woman named Lilia Bernanke. Her pseudonym is Jessica Brown. That includes General Charles Brown himself. He would stalk me too. Saif Abdullah would stalk me too. Saif Abdullah's family would stalk me. Saif ul Haq, most especially, would stalk me, and they would always try to do crazy things. I mean, they would poke holes in my tires, they would steal money out of my car. I would call the police. The police would literally look at the footage in front of me, they would see the crime happening, and they'd be like, nope, didn't see anything. They would move on. And who was showing up in the police uniforms? The Air Force officers themselves. And so effectively, for years and years, leading up to me, before I even joined up the Air Force, Saif ul Haq admitted to me that the reason his parents had me go to the office at the university and falsify having a mental health condition so I could hang out with him was so they could try to use that as evidence against me later on down the road, and so that they could siphon off finances from a trust my mother had built for me because of her really dangerous health condition, which is cancer, right? And that's why she put the trust together in the first place. Saif ul Haq was twisting that, and he was like, oh, it's because you're special needs, and so I need that money. And it turns out he was just buying a bunch of weed with it, Other folks that I had to live with were just also siphoning off the finances for stupid things. My own sibling, Noor Haloum, and her husband were siphoning off money and acting as executors. And basically, they would text me and be like, "Hey, we're inviting you over for dinner," and I'd have dinner with them. And for portions of the day, they would have like very condescending conversations with me, which I thought was annoying. And it turns out they were videotaping that and trying to record it as evidence, like, "Oh yeah, we're having sessions with him, we're taking care of him, he really needs our help." And so just all sorts of folks were just basically, they saw this bank account, they saw it was loaded up with money, and they started siphoning off money instead of just asking for help. And so even years before I joined up the Air Force, like I was telling you, the same way Saif-ul-Haq set me up for failure by trying to claim that I had a mental health condition, when in reality it was just like a little fake self-diagnosis so that he could grant me entry into his home and let me hang out with him, and so he could discuss his actual fetal alcohol syndrome that he suffers from, the microcephaly, which is a physical deformation of his skull that you can notice. His skull is so small that his brain can't develop, and so I was literally taking care of this guy before and after the Air Force, and he, as a general, was going to try to use that against me and claim that somehow, some way, I was a special needs person and he was taking care of me, and that's why he's justified in siphoning off finances from the trust. And thus, basically, I have been under the in the scope of this criminal organization, this crime mob, and it involves many people, it involves many government officials, even high-level government officials. We're talking former U.S. Treasurer Ben Bernanke, his daughter. We're talking General Charles Brown and his children. We're talking, General Saif Abdullah. We're talking General Saif-ul-Haq. And so all of these folks and all of their billions of dollars, and billion with a B, they were leveraging all of their money against me because they knew that if they lied to the government about why they were embezzling a ton of money, they could say it was just for this one individual security clearance. They could go ahead and get away with it. And so they attempted to do just that. I'm making this video here today just to give you a little summary of what I've been dealing with. I go to the courts, I file lawsuits, the lawsuits get rejected. Basically, the judge says, "Oh, this is a bunch of baloney, this can't be happening, this can't be possible," right? I try to get restraining orders from judges at the courts. The courts basically are stuffed with judges, the judges being folks like Mike Hughes, an individual that I worked for at aerospace companies, multiple aerospace companies. He would show up and act like a boss there, when in reality he was working down at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, where I was being trained up with the Secret Service and being investigated for my Yankee white security clearance. And so, this scam goes way back. It's a long con, involves many, many people. I do everything in my power involving going to legal authorities. I am constantly denied. Danielle Olson, a lawyer and a military officer, went to the courtroom and denied my restraining order attempts. Mike Hughes went to the courts dressed as a judge and denied my restraining order attempts, and these restraining orders were against folks that they both closely work with, folks that are in the military, folks that are officers, folks that are conspiring to embezzle a ton of money and rob it from me. And at this point in time, there have been death squads sent out after me, weapons. We're talking spy snakes, so basically translucent snakes with poison tip on the end, and basically it's like a really long robotic arm. They've poisoned me with those before. They swapped out my medication with fentanyl pills. I accidentally took one and had symptoms of an overdose. I don't do drugs, most especially not opioids. The craziest I've ever gotten in my youth has been weed. And so, it's just this huge conspiracy by a ton of people. They're stalking me, they're wearing disguises, they're leveraging their roles and their positions in government and their ability to set up war game exercises, quote unquote. And my sister, Noor Haloum, the person that was embezzling money from the trust, her father-in-law is the general of war game exercises, and his name is Jim Puhek. And one thing he has been doing is he was the gentleman at the commissary that lied about me assaulting him, right? He very much was involved in this setup, in this crime, and this embezzlement from the get-go. He was very much setting up the boxing match so that I could be a guaranteed loss and everybody could take my money. And when I reported the sexual assault, when I reported the rape that occurred at the black site, he very much did not like that. And not only did they disallow me from reporting the sexual assault and basically kick me off base immediately afterwards and take away my job with the military, despite me having an enlistment. Not only did they do all that, but they also have been stalking me and abusing me ever since. And so it's just been this really huge long con. It's been very abusive. It started 10 years ago, even longer than that now. And it involves people doing things for race motivated reasons. There's a lot of Jewish Israeli folks in that unit, and a lot of them have been very racist against me. A lot of them have been so pro-Israeli that they go, well, you're from Palestine, so we can't let you succeed. We can't let you win money. You're from Palestine, and therefore you are equivalent to a Nazi to us. And not once was I racist to them. The worst I ever got was basically calling them out on their racism. That's as mean as I've gotten. That's the only reason race relations have been brought up in my time with them. But they've been very racist. As it turns out, the folks that I lived with were also very much Jewish Israeli. That includes Jacqueline Braden, that includes Garrett Myers, that includes Joshua Rodriguez, and they very much are basically isolating me and trying to ruin my life, because to them I'm a second-class citizen. To them I am a person that is introverted, and therefore they feel that they can get away with committing a bunch of crimes against me. At this point in time, very recently, I've been having attempts on my life by Saif Abdullah and Saif Ulhaq. They've also had a woman they know forcibly rape me so they can try to falsify that I'm in a relationship with them. They gas me out with anesthesia, even in my bedroom, even in my dorm room. They bribe the NAU staff, and they allow themselves to live in my dorm while wearing a disguise. And it's been this whole thing. And right above me lives Ethan Tersini, one of the people that okayed kicking me off base and okayed covering up the rape that occurred, because to them money is so much more important than justice for sex crimes. And I think that's basically as succinct of a summary as I could give. So much information is lacking. There are so many more heinous crimes that these people have committed, and yes, I'm talking things like rape and things like murder, and things like torture, and so physical and otherwise. And so I hope this kind of gives you like a quick gist. I hope you had 28 minutes of your day from my 28 years of life to listen.